My name is Craig Kaplan. I'm a professor here in computer science, and it's my pleasure to introduce Kim Davidson, today's final speaker. Kim, like most of us, first and foremost, is a Waterloo alumnus, and math 1981, I think as it said in the information there. Yeah, thank you, Kim. He is also the recipient of the West Graham Medal, which is one of our top awards that we give to Waterloo alumni. That was in 1999. In 1987, he co-founded Side Effects, a software company in Toronto, the makers of Houdini, which is one of the most important, most popular pieces of software in the film industry, particularly when it comes to blowing things up, right? Smoke, fire, water, all kinds of particle effects and other kinds of physical simulations. I'm sure you'll see lots of those. Also, Side Effects is a great employer of Waterloo co-ops and Waterloo alumni. And you may ask, have I seen movies that have used Houdini? Yes, I guarantee you most certainly have, and I'm sure you'll see examples coming up. He's also the recipient of 3 SciTech, Scientific and Technical Achievement Academy Awards, and most recently in 2018, he accepted on behalf of Side Effects the Academy Award of Merit, which is the next level above that, which is actually the statuette. So, and I heard a rumor, but we might get a preview of the statuette. And may I also say, the statuette was presented to him personally by Patrick Stewart, which is even a higher honor.
Sir Patrick.
There's a lot I would do to have Patrick Stewart say my name and call me up onto stage. And of course, Kim is here to tell us how to get from campus to the red carpet. Please welcome Kim.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, sir. Afternoon. How many were in the last talk? Just a show of hands, I just want to see, because that's really, I had no idea. I got the West Graham Award in 1999, as Craig pointed out, and I think as you're just doing and trying to get to figure out what you want to do next, and I just still didn't know what I wanted to do, and just to hear some of that history, I knew I had a little piece of that, but I was up here to give a talk then. I hope I've put a few more slides in since then and improved some of those slides, but we're still doing slides, right? Why aren't we doing this in VR? That's the world we should be in right now. Not that Google Cardboard thing that you see out there. So this talk, Campus to Red Carpet, was given to me moments before it went up on the website. Is this okay, Kim? It's like, yeah, sure, let's go with that. So from Campus to Red Carpet, or maybe it should have been from Red Room to Red Carpet or something like that. So let's get this over with. There's me on campus. That was actually my second graduation, because I graduated from architecture, which as I said, I didn't know what to do in 1978, and I came back and did math and really didn't get into computers. I got more into computers when I was in architecture, strangely enough, but I always wanted to come back and make a computer and that. So there is a strong connection with the computer graph science group as we talk over the years. And that's me in campus, and we're all done where there's me. Thank you very much. On the red carpet. I got to go back to school for some decorum, though. I mean, this is craziness. Like, and then, of course, there's Oscar. And as Craig is absolutely right, we brought the little guy along, so I won't put that right by the... Had some white gloves even to manage it, but I don't know. What's the correct way to hold this thing? But you can come down later if you'd like to hold it. And it's got good weight. That's the first thing you notice when you pick that thing up. It's got great weight. So that's me to the red carpet. But that was, I think I have a date there. No, on the next slide, I guess. So the Academy Award is actually just a couple weeks after. There's an award that's been going on since the beginning of the Academy Award, 70 years, that's called the Scientific and Technical Achievement Award. So there's 3 levels of awards, as explained. There's certificates, there's plaques, and there's Oscars. They don't have to give out any in any given year. They don't have to give out more than one. They can give out any number of any category. It's whatever they feel. So everyone actually at that banquet and that dinner has already, knows they're a winner. There's no, the envelope goes to. and my wife and my daughter were also there, so if you have to ask them about some red carpet moments, they're up there. So that is Sir Patrick Stewart, and this is what you learn from acting class right here. Just ham it up, you know, and someone snaps a picture at the right moment. But a couple weeks later, you go to you're on the red carpet, you've got the tickets, and you get to go to the red carpet and get a seat somewhere about there. And if you look in the front row there, you see Meryl Streep and Frances McDormand, and this was the big picture they put on their website. And then Meryl Streep's jumped in front of my moment here, because there's myself and my, I mean, really, eh? So this was on the People magazine website, so they didn't stay long, but they always make a nice appearance in the after party that's just upstairs in the Kodak Theater. I had no interest in going, truly, but I'm glad I went. It's just this huge logistical, and any mathematician and computer science guy would just go, well, how did that happen? How does that go? Anyway, I digress. This was the abstract for the top one was the abstract for this talk, how a 3D visual effects software company in the hyper-competitive industry has kept innovating in over 3 decades. But it's sort of like, I think it's just like I've learned how to be a business guy running this company and watching it grow from 2 men to over 100 people now. Art and science, that's what I always loved, where those two came together. That's why I went into architecture in the first place. And then, of course, history. Now, as you live through all this, you have this collection of the computer graphics world and the mathematics world and all sorts of things you see. And it helps you, I think, predict the future. But as Don said, it's like there's no certainty. So a little eye candy before we get going. I just thought, roll the reel. It's really what our customers are doing today with the software. Thanks for that. So that's, as you can see, there's probably over 1,000 companies that we sell to, not just in film, but in games, TV, commercials, and motion graphics and such. So this is a 3 slides of side effects today, again, just to give you the overview before I start back up and doing some reminiscing. There's me, the company, and the company's software. So I did architecture. I'm a programmer and an animator, although I don't get to do much of anything the last 15 years except enjoy the fruits of everyone else's labor, and meet Sir Patrick Stewart, of course. And we founded in 1987. I co-founded it with one other person. We have over 100 staff, and we have this amazing software called Houdini, which we released the first version in 1996. It's a full 3D solution, means you make the models, you can render the models, move the models, break the models, etc. And this is just a bit of our success. Those are the other awards that I've won, the certificates, the plaques, and then the third level is the award, Academy Award of Merit officially. Yeah, it's been used in all, so we don't get an award for this, obviously, but like they don't mention Houdini when the guy walks up on stage in the Academy for the visual effects, but we know the company that did it. Sometimes we know the artists that worked on it. Often it's the people who get on stage are with the studios, not with the production companies, but that's Houdini's in all those movies. And then I did the game slides a little different. I just threw a bunch of the game customers that we have some licenses in, and this is the whole company getting together for an anniversary in 2017. So, doing the campus to side effects, not all the way to the red carpet so fast. This is my history slide. If you're in that last meeting, you saw some of these. These are actually my punch cards taken a couple days ago on my desk. That's a deck about that thick, so I still have the punch cards. And when I came in architecture, we were using the key punch before we moved to the widget system that you see up there. So that I would have been, I don't know if I'm in that picture, but I was in that room and in that lineup collecting paper. How many actually were in that red room or around, who were that era too, up here? Yeah. Yeah, I thought you would have been, like he's telling you this stuff. He's like, yeah, you were there, right? And I wasn't actually in math at that time. I was up on Phillip Street where architecture was, but I pulled these out because Beatty and Booth became very instrumental to our career because they formed that computer graphics lab, and Paul Breslin, I think, was one of the early students in the computer graphics lab, and I joined him in a company you'll see later, and I got to know John Beatty and Kelly Booth much later after they'd gone out to Vancouver to set up a graphics lab out there as well. So then I got this job, and look, I was at a trade show in Vegas, and I'm on a red carpet. It's crazy. So I went to this company in a summer before I graduated and said, I saw your ad in the paper, and they're just so busy porting the Unix system. They go, have you programmed in C? And I said, no, I did Fortran, Snowball, COBOL, Pascal. How hard can C be? And they go, okay, you got a job. So I read the book that night, and I'm writing in C, but it wasn't so much C, it's just porting from one Unix version to 6 to version 7 of all these mainframe computers, Convex, Alliant, Honeywell, PerkinElmer. I don't know if any of these companies or machines are all gone now, but it's the mainframe world all kind of collapsed, including the DEC VAX. So I was working at this company called Human Computing Resources, and then the government got some money and to build software at this company up the street where TVO was, called Omnibus Computer Graphics, and I went there in 1986 or 85, 86 and 87 I was there, and I died and gone to heaven because Ron Becker, who was a computer science guy from U of T, ran this HCR, and they were always promising graphics, but they never really did much. I did a little bit there, but it was when I went to Omnibus where I just died and gone to heaven because you use math and computers to make pictures, and it's like, from all my drawing days, it's like, this is crazy good. And that's me sitting at a Volker Craig terminal because we're talking to a VAX upstairs. You'll see that later. And I worked there until, and we were working on this thing called Prisms because they had to name it, but the National Research Council gave a $800,000 grant to build this software. So that's what brought a lot of programmers there. When I say a lot, maybe there were 10 of us total, 6 in Toronto. and a little more on Omnibus later, but it went under, and so Omnibus went on the bust. And they'd acquired Digital and Robert Abel, and we get together still at SIGGRAPH, which is a big trade show down in this year in Los Angeles, often in Los Angeles, and so Digital, Omnibus, and Abel get together, and we call it the DOA, or Dead on Arrival, because they were only really owned by Omnibus for about 8 months. I love CG history. I kind of picked it up after the fact, but in 1981, there was this thing done by a company called III, where they did a juggler, and this premiered in 1980. So 81, when I'd be graduating, I didn't really know this stuff was going on even. I wasn't at SIGGRAPH. I didn't know about SIGGRAPH's convention and all this interest in graphics. But this was done by a company called III, and the interesting thing about this is that it took 3 people 4 months to create the 3 seconds of animation. The whole thing's a minute. And when at SIGGRAPH, I wasn't there, but when it screened at SIGGRAPH, it got a standing ovation, because it's like, this is crazy, you know, we can do humans and a computer. Well, we still can't do them, but, and the other interesting one, which my wife says is really, really confusing, but these were all the, if you read top to bottom, these are all the companies of the time and sort of where they ended, not always where they started and where they started. But this was all the companies that really, around the world that were doing computer. They were actually writing their own software and working on mainframe computers. And it took 4 of them to join together to do about 15 minutes of Tron. And if you watch Tron, that original Tron, all the looks are different. They're not working together, really. They're just doing their own thing. They all have their own software. They all have their own look. If they only had had Houdini in those days, it would have been so much easier. Or Prisms, as it was in those. But and Omnibus was just coming into being. There was a media company before that, but I really would say that was the beginning of Omnibus. I didn't join till Omnibus till down here. But just I wanted to give you a sense of the world at that point. Also that year was another interesting movie. A lot of Waterloo grads went off to ILM and worked in ILM, and this one in particular struck me because they did a minute. Now, think of the III piece and the Tron piece, and this was all done with fractals. So this, like using math to create the whole Genesis effect in Wrath of Khan, the Star Trek show Wrath of Khan. So I think of this as where we want to go. Computer, we want to do lots and lots of graphics, but we're really lazy, but we're really smart. So let's like the computers to do a lot of stuff, and that's what Lauren Carpenter was doing at ILM on this piece in particular. But back to Omnibus, so now we're in 85, and you can see the state-of-the-art of computer graphics in those days was not Wrath of Khan or Tron. It was really, this was it. Flying Logos built this business because when you think about it, TV resolution is only 480 by, 386 by 4, or, sorry, wow, I can't even get TV resolution anymore. But it was low resolution, 480 by 386. And so you could render that, you could render it quarter res. They gave you a lot of money for 5 seconds of animation. So, even though these things probably cost $50,000, $100,000, you had a lot of money for a short little bit. And there's no colored highlights. The top ones, their own logo is not even 3D, for God's sake. It's an airbrush piece of art. And so is Alvin Toffler's Third Wave, with a Coke can stretched by a video device called the ADO in the background. So it's not even all 3D, but it was like we're a 3D company. And we did this really, really early thing. I love media and entertainment, but we did this thing for Scotia Plaza, the building that's down in downtown Toronto that wasn't built, but instead of building this huge model that you could have people in pointed floors, you had this kind of walk through this whole building and fly around. And we did this building. And look, we got reflections, but we actually don't have reflections because we just flipped the data and did transparency. We had transparency, and we could do that. So I write stuff like, texture maps and clipping planes and things like that were to come, but that was kind of what we were doing in those days. These were our machines. We had this VAX 750, the VAX 780. They were their main workhorses. That's not our machine, but that's the model of machines. When we bought Digital Productions, which did Last Starfighter, we had access to a Cray. There was a Cray down at UAT, so we're porting it to our render to the Cray. But that just gives you a sense of the time, but also what we had access to. Omnibus itself was in 3 locations. I was in Toronto. That's Doug McMillan in Los Angeles office on the Paramount lot. Sophia Heffercorn in New York. There were about 8 people there, about 12 people there and about 22 in Toronto headquarters. The RMO 5 disk drives, how we stored data, also on tape, but these were big fast storage, so they'd be spinning so you could save and get your data faster. Some of the storage and rendering devices. All our rendering was done to 1-inch reel-to-reel. So you'd put a picture up in a frame buffer, which is just on the top right here. The VAX 780 would render the thing, but then you'd put it on a, I know I had the button earlier. Oh, have I got this upside down? Yeah, or not. I'm going to burn someone's eyes out. Oh, there it is. Anyway, just so I have this, yeah. So that's the frame buffer. When your frame was ready, then this thing a trigger would rewind that, and it'd snap a frame, and about 20 minutes later, you'd have a new frame. So when you got, for TV, you got 30 frames a second, right? So you got, if you can render a frame in 20 minutes, you know, you're going to be all night rendering, sort of just on the rendering part. Usually you didn't even know what you're rendering, and then it was black or something because the camera's pointed the wrong way. But look, just a few years later, we had so much more. That's Flight of the Navigator with a shiny chrome morphing ship reflecting the plates, the live background plates flying around in Disney's Flight of the Navigator. And that was like 5 years before Terminator 2 with the character walking around morphing and reflecting the environment. We had commercials, animation of the tree and a person, refraction in the top, bump mapping, texture mapping. Maybe some of this stuff doesn't mean that much, but you can see the quality starting to really move up. Still slow, still recording to tape, and even character that we invented called Marilyn Monroebot for internal purposes. So, as I said, it went on the bust, but this was where Prisms was born, 85, 86. I've still got those reels in my office. If you want to come downtown and visit me, you can visit Oscar and see some history. But I still have these reels. I don't have a drive to run them on, but we bought the Kennedy 9-track tape drive so we could get the software off, and we're getting all this software off when we were starting to use these new found funky graphics boxes. So this is really what built the graphics industry. It wasn't these mainframes. It was going. All those big companies, except for ILM and I guess really Polygon Pictures in Japan, those are the only sort of named ones left. Everything else has gone under or been acquired. But this company built, and this is the company that's changed the world, because now you could get those computers for only $100,000. You know, everyone could get in. You didn't have to buy a Cray for $1 million. You could get something for $100,000. And as you were saying, pointing out earlier, the price starts, you know, crashing down as more and more CPUs and more people buy and more competition comes online. And the graphics cards themselves come in somewhere in the middle of this, and that kind of changed the world again. But this really was the shoulders that built the graphics industry, and Silicon Graphics was everywhere on it. And we programmed on it all. IRIX is the version of Unix that was. We had all of those. I still have a bunch of those at the office. And this was a picture of the software. When we bought Prisms, it was just a collection of programs, text programs that you strung together in the Bourne shell or with a pipe symbol, and you could just send one output of one command to the input. So there weren't graphics programs. They were text commands that could do things graphically, build graphic files that could be rendered, but you never saw it. This is the first thing that we built that we kept building on, called Prisms, had a graphic. So this was actually called Action. Prisms was just really a collection, and Action was our graphics program that everyone thought was Prisms, but that's fine. And then when you start a company, you don't just have to build software. If you're going to sell it, you have to build manuals, learning materials, customer support. So you kind of do everything on day one, and then you hire the second person, the third person, fourth person, et cetera, et cetera. Here's just a couple of things. So somewhere in '92, we said, we want to rewrite this thing and take advantage of the power of these computers are getting more and more powerful. So we want to do something. What's my problem? We want to do something, you know, where we can actually show these operators. So if that's a Unix command, and that's a Unix command, and that's a Unix command, we want to see those Unix commands. We don't just want to see a string of names with some arguments. We want to see them, and we want to see what the argument, so if you click on that, you see the argument. So this was what we started to do, and we also wanted to use C++. So we started rewriting and shipping with Prisms things, a morphing package, a compositing package, there was a little paint package, and that. So it was really us testing out, and none of our customers knew what we were doing, but in 1996 we released a fully C++, we integrated all those things into one program. That's Houdini, the one that this guy's responsible for. And this is just a comparison of the kind of the interfaces. There's not a lot to be, gained from here. We had to write all our own UI too. There's not like UI libraries that are running on these things for your buttons. So, all those buttons are calling a program that does a graphics call. So a square, a white square, a dark square, text, get the cursor position, do something, make the button go dark, keep it dark, keep the state. So all the buttons and everything, that's all our programming as well. Now and more, when there's libraries that you can buy that are very standard, you take advantage of those as you evolve your software. But you can see there's a lot of similarities, but you're seeing down here one of the networks as opposed to, this is actually a network, you just can't see it as such, and it could be fetching from other stuff, because that guy, this little box of parameters of controls, it's just a text command with lots of controls, and it could be fetching its input from, it could be something like that, it could be fetching its input from that box, if you like that, and that box closed. So, it's kind of like, gives you a little of the evolution, I guess, and the text port's very important in that world too. Remember the fractal one I showed with the Graphicon? This was another really, really cool one that I liked. This was done by a customer, Digital Domain in Los Angeles, that Scott Ross from ILM, along with IBM, started up, and they bought a lot of Prisms and then Houdini. But I kind of like this one, because this was, again, all procedural. So this is one of the best visual effects in 1998. And it was done by just a couple artists, but they could create a lot of wind and blowing all through math, if you like, but sitting on top of this platform called Houdini. This slide almost doesn't belong, but just I had this great, I always loved cartoons, and so I wrote a show that got 52 episodes produced, so I was a co-producer, executive producer, and running a studio that was bigger than Side Effects at the time, and I really didn't need the extra work, but it was a lot of fun. So if you go on YouTube, I think someone's loaded a ton of these old shows up, and it was all done in Prisms and then Houdini Software, Hoop 4.0. And this is just Houdini today, a screenshot, just to show you some of it. It's nothing like going to the website and maybe. I got 3 slides that really show, how far we've come. This thing's 5,000 times faster. Look at the form factor too, and it's probably, doesn't use too much electricity to run, as opposed to that probably costs $500,000 just to feed the coolant and the cooling system back then. So we gone a long way on CPU. We've gone a long way, obviously, on storage. There's the Kennedy 9-track tape. If it was formatted, depending on your format, about 150 megs, you got this terabyte on this little form factor chip. It's faster, it's just better. And then lastly, graphics, where we come with graphics. There's a personal iris, and that was not their first one, but that's their second versions, I guess, system. MIPS chips, and you've gone about 1 million times faster now with the GeForce, the one that the gamers tend to put into their systems, or our customers tend to put in. So this is just a lot of, or some eye candy. When we're releasing a new feature, internally we'll do these kinds of tests. So we're doing character, we're doing hair, we're doing water, we're doing breaking things, smoke things, all that stuff you saw, we have to test it first. So this was from Houdini 17, where we're saying, we already had fluids, but in this one we want to make the foam pattern faster and better, more cellular. This is just another one of that. Whoops. Let this one play first. I have to go back twice to get that. It's just another one. So this is, we have a cloth solver that came out with Houdini 17. We never had very good cloth. Our competition had good cloth, but if we've got everything else, why don't we have good cloth? So this is our new fast cloth solver. That's, again, just an internal test. There's this one that shows that the cloth solver is not just cloth, but it's also grains. And this one shows it really well, because the solvers, when you have a unified solver, it means you can work in 0 space, the grains, 2 space, the wires, 3 space, the cloth, if you like, and 3 space, the little rubber toy. So that's sort of like that. And it's nice when the solvers work together because you've got water hitting something or a car crashing in the glass. You want to make sure those things are talking because one thing is going to influence the other. So those solvers, the more they can be in one system as opposed to go out to another customer and get just some particles that don't affect the character doesn't affect the particles. You want them all working in one system so that you can put them in and you can have your crowd system, you have your cloth, you can have, and the animator's not doing very much. He's just setting up the system. And then, I mean, he's doing a lot. Animators are amazing. They're artists at the end of the day. It's all about the eye and the look. But you give them these tools, and they spend less time trying to figure out why the solver's not working and or how you can cheat it, how to cheat it this way or that. How am I doing? So customer work. I've shown you a little sort of the in-house stuff, and you saw the big demo reel. But one of the things we do is work pretty close with customers, and we end up wanting to also work inside other software. So this is actually Houdini, not working in Houdini, but working in the Unity editor. So this is Unity, but what people have done in Houdini is create a few smart objects that have controls. So those controls these are all controls that are in the Unity interface, which is the game editor engine. Unity is the engine, also the editor. But Houdini's running in the background, so if the guy changes the curve or the slider, it goes to Houdini running non-graphically, comes back and changes the elevation based on the slider input. So you can give the artist a lot of control without exposing all the little cool little tricks or the networks underneath. You'll see some of this network and some other things. So here he's got like, he's made them into little icons down there in that corner. You can see he can pull up, he's doing the decorations, but these are all smart decorations. So this could be, there's sliders for changing that, sliders for changing that. So he picks one of those, gets the control, he's picked the telephone poles, he just changes the slider and off he goes. Now he's just going to hit play or something and he's building rocks. So this is a kind of like scattering tools. Just let that play for a couple seconds more. And then people, building a nice community too. They do a lot of your teaching and training and things. The Kenny himself's in LA. He's done a lot of training videos on how to get this into the game engine. So now you cook that out into the game engine, which doesn't take long. It's kind of a static thing now. There's not like a lot's changing. But he's playing it. If you don't like it, just go back to the Unity editor or all the way back to Houdini if you need something changed. This one I love. This was done by just a couple guys in Russia for a movie called Attraction, but this shows how all those, remember I said all those solvers have to work together and influence one another. So you have all this procedural systems, but you also have them all working together. So if the director wants a change, you have controls. So they build themselves a whole system in Houdini for buildings. So they have controls for the heights of the buildings, the style of the building, color of the building. So this is just showing some of the variations that they go through. But then they don't just have controls for the buildings, they also have a whole procedural system for building the urban network, so they can populate with those buildings that they've got built, and those two are working together. So if you change the road network, you could change the buildings or the size of the buildings. And then even the spaceship that crashes, it's a whole procedural system. No one's going to go copy, 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 copy. It's like, okay, I need just copy a bunch of things, controls. Fires all has to track the motion. If the motion changes, the fire has to track. You don't have to do anything, everything's touch. All the rigid bodies as it breaks, the trees, everything's like sort of one big system now, so that if anything wanted to change, if you want more rows in the arena, you need that taller building there, the flight path changes. Incredible. And that's just a couple guys to get that final shot that you saw earlier. So our software runs standalone, but it plugs into the Unity editor, it plugs into the Unreal editor, it plugs into Max, it plugs into my other industry softwares out there. This is an example from a little company called RPG, or Phoenix, that did this role-playing game, Dauntless. And so this is now the Unreal editor, which is another game engine Unreal's another game engine from Epic. If you've played Fortnite, you know who Epic is. But they do sell software. They're both a software company and a production company. And this is our software, not running this, but our software is responsible for all that landscape that's now in the, so now we're still in the Unreal Editor, but the artist is changing things around. Like I want that level lower, I want this zone higher, because these are going to be game zones, right? And these zones get turned into Voronoi noise patterns, but their color really affects what kind of stuff's going to go on them at the end. So this is, so under the covers of all these different assets is Houdini running. And if at any time, you wanted to go back and say, you can do a whole lot, but the artist wants to control. So now we're actually in Houdini and saying, this is, you can see now these node networks. It's like, this one controls this controls that one's not working right. So you can go open those up, you can go dive down into those networks, because they're networks within networks within networks. Then you can lock those off. So artists generally aren't spending time, except for the kind of the left-right brain artists. But even then, you're still not writing code for the most part, or at all. You're just spending time saying, how does this work, connecting these networks together. Or the artist does, not you. And then just this open landscape. So we kind of embrace this word procedural. If you Google procedural, you'll probably see side effects, but SpeedTree just does trees. They use a kind of a procedural system. This company called Algorithmics that was just bought by Adobe, they use procedural systems for texturing. Quixel's another one, they do procedural textures as well. So other companies that do smaller pieces are using the computer smarter and smarter and smarter, so you're not hand modeling hundreds of rocks, but getting, building in some smarts into that. So it's not all fun and games, it's not all film and games and TV. It's Houdini and Prisms before that's been used in so many other areas. We just happen to have a focus. We've had bigger competitors, so we really focus first on high-end film, but now backing out a bit to games and that. But Houdini's always sold into some weird things like the Scotiabank Plaza that I showed you in a visualization. At IKEA, they built furniture with it and visualization. So these slides just sort of show you beyond film and games some of the Houdini uses. Oculus Story Studio, the Oculus Rift started up, so we can tell stories. So they've closed now, but they built 3 different stories, all using Houdini, sculpting with the Oculus paint system, bringing it into Houdini this is Houdini interface to clean up all the data. I think of us as big data platforms sometimes too, because you can add attributes, take off attributes, and see your attributes colored or not. This is Pinewood Studios in downtown Toronto, where a company called CERT Center is. We partner with CERT because they got previs equipment, they got motion capture equipment, they're doing digital virtual humans, so it's a partnership between industry, government, and education. I think one of your profs, Vic DeCiccio, and I sit on the board, so Vic's from the Waterloo. So he calls in for the board meetings. He's not there, but this is the Pinewood. This is in Hong Kong, where we have a Singapore partner who does Houdini and sells it, and he's really into the VR thing, so he's done a lot of work in VR. So just a taste of this stuff. Some really cool stuff when you get these procedural tools into artists' hands. And we're not just talking about one dimension and 2 dimensions here. This thing's 3 dimensions and moving and morphing. So which is the 4th dimension of time. So we're using Houdini math to create some really cool fractal colors changing based on sound, or faces are painted using some sort of and moving. This is a whole little system for doing art. These aren't strictly art, but this guy is just crazy good, and is worth looking at. Well, I should give him a shout out because he is a really cool dude. Probably in the notes underneath or before. Oh no, it should be there. He's in the wrong order. All by Chris H. Back, H-B-A-K. His reel just blows the people in the industry away. I go to Vimeo, type Houdini recent, and I get a lot of keep up with it, or Houdini anything, and you get a lot in Vimeo. This is so this is sort of a mathematics but visualization lab. This is a cool one because this is the black hole, and there's a paper on this in SIGREF, I think, that talked about building, this is the best visualization of a black hole ever done. They had Kip Thorne in there, the guys from Double Negative, who was a customer, and they used Houdini quite a bit for the volumetrics of the accretion disk in there, and just to visualize a lot of that. Changed our render to, because it was just so many billions and trillions of particles. This big fractal, interesting fractal 3D thing. This isn't, I guess, math per se, but it's the flight. You take in all the flight data from the web and visualize all the flights at any given time, some controls. This is a whole series that's on our web of just math, fun with math. This is fun with sine and cosine. So that was the first thing I learned as sine and cosine, and I thought, who uses this stuff? And believe me, that sine, cosine, dot products, cross products, matrix multiplying, that's it. That's all you need to know to get into computer graphics, pretty much. It's crazy how much that stuff is, the roots of it. We're also doing this, like we're looking at the water. We're also doing some in-house tests with ML. So we have erosion tools that can erode a landscape, a fractal landscape, and let it cook over time as if water was running down it and erode it. But what we did was soak in from the web, some portions of the Rocky Mountains, and we marked where all the red lines, and so we created these pairs of height maps and red and blue lines, and then handed it to machine learning, and now we can just paint red lines and blue lines, and about 3,000 times faster than we could erode this piece of landscape. We just use whatever the machine learned, that these red lines and blue lines map into that thing on the left at that speed. So that's sort of Houdini, us internally playing with machine learning. But there's this cool movie that you may have seen called Into the Spider-Verse. So this article just came out, actually, by Mike Seymour on the FX Guide. And so this is what they tried first. Every render has this thing called toon shading, but toon shading just not exactly what artists would draw for a comic book, per se. So then you do ink lines on what they call the texture maps. But the problem with the ink line is you look at that line right there, and as the head turns, the chin's over here, and the ink line's there because of the way the texture map, it was on the right spot, but now it's not on the right spot on the face. So it has to move. So it's sort of a two-pass machine learning, and this is the result here where the ink line's doing what the artist wants. So the artist sits in the Houdini world for the second pass and just pulls the lines on a whole bunch of different turntables of the head, and just pulls the line, and then you train the machine learning, and you end up with the ink line. So this is the Houdini interface, and this is a layover of the Houdini interface that the artist can control, and it records that and sends that to the machine learning. So this is the kind of system at Sony Pictures ImageWorks for that. And well, I'm doing amazing because I'm just talking so fast. So this is beyond the red carpet. So it didn't end in 1918. This year, we got this little gal called the Emmy, which actually is named after technology. And the cool thing here is, like in this picture here, Waterloo grad, Waterloo grad, Waterloo grad, Waterloo grad, Waterloo grad. The guy's only like 27 too. It's like crazy. And he's got an Emmy. And this thing they just hand to you, and you're just trying to get this through customs, and they're going, yeah, sure, right. It's not going in my checked baggage, I'll tell you that. But it's even worse, with Emmy, they give you this thing that looks like it's your uncle, and you're bringing them back to rest. So carrying this around the casinos. Like, we were not on a red carpet, we were on a flowered, multi-flowered carpet, and it's Vegas, maybe. So they have their own tech, and it looks something like this. So it doesn't end with that. And awards really are just kind of like a moment in time. We love what we do. We love what's happening with the VR world and what our customers do with our software, where they'll take us next. And as Don was saying earlier, you don't really know, but you have the speed with which things are happening, and that's exciting to us. So I think with that, we've been here. It's a a warm day, and I babble. I have fun. I don't know if you did, but that's it for me, and we can take some questions if you want, because we do have the room till 4:30. Yes?
Are you considering other markets like education, biology, for graphics that will help younger people understand concepts a little more clearly and maybe help them in their education process?
So we're the question, well, yeah, everyone heard. So the thing about, as a company of, 5, then 30, and then 50, and now even 100, it's a lot to service Weta, in New Zealand, and digital double negative in London, England, and ILM, and Sony, and the gang. So we have to stay somewhat focused. That said, there are, as I put in the last few slides, it is really potentials and has been used in a lot of different ways. So we'd love when people just take it, do it, or some sort of joint venture, put it under the covers, or however they do it, like they've done with that Mask series that we just put up on the web. Or even if we don't, I just really, really, really like it. But as a company, you go into a little vertical and you can get, it's like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So we just have to, I guess, bumping along, especially in the middle years where there was 3 public companies we're competing against, we had to get really laser focused at that point. And we actually were, Japan was our biggest market in '92. About 1/3 of our revenue came out of Japan, much of that in industrial design and games. But when graphics cards and then Autodesk, SGI bought Alias, and Avid bought Softimage, those were all public companies, and they're all fighting for market share because it was just taking off. And we just said, we're not going to, and I saw a lot of, those were big companies went under, but so did a lot of software companies go under in those days. So I credit our focus on high-end film with sort of keeping the company going. So we still have that memory, I guess, business memory.
I can add on to it.
Sure.
It must be difficult to keep with the hardware. Well, you mentioned all of the gradations up through Silicon Graphics, Next, etc., and the power curve going down. So you've got new iterations of your software. You've got new iterations of hardware, much more powerful, and then also the idea of how do you keep talent?
Talent's really easy. If you come there and you like the culture is great, I mean, you like the media. I mean, that was cool. You guys all liked it. Do you like that? So talent's easy. I mean, sure, Facebook comes in and Microsoft. There's one guy there. His brother's working on the West Coast for about 5 times the salary, and we pay well. But if someone at Microsoft wants it, and so I'm sure all our developers get calls from headhunters and recruiters, because especially now IT is just taken off. So if you know anything in the knowledge industries and computer science, you've got a job. But so keeping talent hasn't, we do well. We have a good environment, and we're downtown Toronto, fun industry. But keeping, your other part of the question was, how do you keep up? In some ways, it's almost easier for us because everything's going to change, and we're not afraid of making a long-term play. So if we have to rewrite geometry libraries to take doubles and floats and compactness, or we're now going on to for our lighting system, we're going on to Pixar's USD, we can make these, which is universal scene description, which seems to be going to take off. We're going to be the best and first adopters of that. But because we don't have to march to the quarter earnings, and we just kind of say, hey, it makes sense, the long-term vision. We can play the long-term, short-term, medium-term. I think it's easier. And so those changes actually help us, I think, more. They're chasms in the industry that actually help us more as the insurgent, the smaller guy.
Thank you very much for the presentation. With this event, we are alumni, looking at a pass from Waterloo and what the amazing things that your company and your people are producing for you. If we look at the future, I saw that you had Oculus Rift and virtual reality. I'm wondering if that is going to play out as a market, as an entertainment, and where would artificial reality versus virtual reality, the merging of the real life, and is that, how real is that? How close to real is that? And then the last part of the question would be, is it going to be hard for a human to start distinguishing what is entertainment and real versus what we see with news and what is purported to be truth?
Yeah, so AR, VR, MR, XR, mixed realities, and X for everything we just talked about, marching really, really fast. I just love it because the last few years, haven't figured out exactly, I'll get to your question, but I haven't figured out exactly where we can play, but it feels the energy around there, it feels like the early days of computer graphics where everyone knows something and no one knows anything. VR has been around for a long time, but now it's that form factor. The Gartner hype cycle's already moved from AR and VR, and it's moved on to machine learning, but I think that VR and AR have like amazing uses. It's already proven in education and defense and training. So a lot of those industries for entertainment, largely the gaming community, which is small, but it'll drive a lot of innovation as well. Some of the problems still remain though with VR is just getting the frame rates up, at high resolutions. You don't think there's high resolutions, but it does have to be stereo high resolutions to stop and high frame rates to stop the flickering. And then when you're moving around, you have to do the tracking really tight if you're going to do a motion kind of thing. So the cardboard, no problem that we saw. If you go look at the cardboard, it's a 360 video, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I hope Waterloo's doing stuff with their psych labs and doing all sorts of testing. I'm sure they are. I don't take that as what they're doing here at Waterloo, but I think it's got great applications. But I'm mostly, in some ways, I'm excited by the technology, but I also know that it's got huge ramifications for us living. I'm going to have courtside seats at the Raptor game, and I'm just going to be at my home. And it's going to be so good because there's going to be a real person there, and there's going to be a VR, a digital character there of my choosing, who knows my wants and wishes. And Lowry's there, and it's like, it's like crazy. Why aren't we doing this in VR? I mean, we're so close to having entertainment uses, or we are, point of purchase marketing vehicles. The biggest thing is how do I get a headset into everyone's hands, and then that's when things go on hyperspeed. So we're not quite there yet. When we go to events, we have this cube. It's a soft thing with a mic in it. We just throw it. Hasn't broken yet anyway. It's made to be thrown. And it says Houdini on it. I should have brought that.
Do you have opinions on how AR will affect storytelling or the film industry?
And I just went to one. Someone at the Game Lab, Joan Gata, I think her name was. What's her name? She spoke in Toronto on storytelling and VR, but they are testing with AR as well. It's the toughest problem. That's why she runs a lab here that does a lot of little tests on how you tell a story, where you get out of the story, and then when you try to do it with live action, you can't control the story, so that's a whole nother problem. She talked largely about VR, but you're doing stuff here at Waterloo in VR storytelling. But I don't have, that's the one that interests me more because I always think it's passive or it's interactive, and people try these multipath movies or have a little cut scenes in video games, which are largely the interactive. And yeah, you have story, but there is this. Over time, I've come to believe that people want to settle in one or the other. Entertain me, tell me where to look, fake me out, trick me. That's what a storyteller does. Gets you into their world and keeps you there and makes you believe in character and that. And it's got great use, and you can already cut a lot of stuff out, and you can direct people. You don't have to put much back there, or you can just transport them in there. That's the easy part. But what good stories, and how do you get that to the masses? Well, we don't have the devices yet, but it will be there. It will be there. We'll be watching Game of Thrones or the next whatever it is on VR devices. And I want to be there too somehow. I don't know.
All right, well, I'm waiting. I was wondering where I couldn't see it from where I was sitting. I don't want to let you leave without
Thanks, Alex.
offering you a token of our appreciation for a great talk.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Can take that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred.